anyone got in contact with any like the judge or anything of that nature that who presented. I believe there's one judge was from Connecticut. I think that's where he was from.
Uh, well, there's Tim Cook was not Tim Cook. Uh, uh, Judge Evans is from Chicago, Cook County.
Okay, okay, okay.
So he was kind of he was one of the speakers, but yeah, we can talk offline on that definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Just some stuff I was thinking about, so we can start seeing what other folks are doing outside of Dane County and what we
Yeah.
need to be able to bring, and with the hopes of other folks seeing that and utilizing those same folks in their counties as well.
Okay, we are all set, Anthony. Whenever you are ready, we can
Okay,
get started.
all righty. I am ready and set to go. All right. So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today is our reentry conference, virtual lunch and learn, the reality of the system and understanding the arrest to court process. We have some phenomenal speakers with us today. And, you know, again, everyone having their own different perspectives. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, thank you, thank you. This is, I want to say this is number maybe 30. I feel like it's 30. If it's not 30, I'm close to. So yeah, so again, want to say thank you everyone, and thank you for our phenomenal panelists that's on the call with us today as well. So we'll go to the next slide here. All right. So only person right now, I'm only seeing Colleen on the side, on my side here. So, I guess I want to go ahead and just start things off and just being able to say, um, if everyone can kind of just pitch in, and Colleen, if you don't mind going first, and just kind of letting the Zoom world and YouTube world know a little bit about your work and your relationship with the criminal justice system.
Sure. So, and I don't know if we have my slides. If you can share my slides, that would be great. Otherwise, we don't need to do that. We can just have a conversation. So either way. So I'm Colleen Clark Bernhardt. I coordinate the Dane County Criminal Justice Council, the CJC as we call it, cjc.countyofdane.com. It's a 13-member executive body made up of folks like the sheriff, the DA, presiding judge, county exec, county board chair, Madison police, Madison mayor. Okay. Oh, intros go first. Perfect. Thank you. So I'll talk more about it, but we're doing some exciting stuff. It's a really obviously hard time right now to feel, for me personally, and I think a lot of folks, to not feel pretty either destroyed, disappointed, dismayed about life going on right now. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but we are doing some things that I think will make a better future. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. David, would you mind going next, please?
Absolutely. I'm David Carlson. Part-time job. I work with the ACLU of Wisconsin. I'm a regional organizer up in the Chippewa Valley, specifically Eau Claire County, with the Smart Justice Campaign. Smart Justice Campaign's aim is to decarcerate Wisconsin. Right now, Wisconsin is one of the top incarcerators in a nation that is one of the top, well, is the top incarcerator in the world. Wisconsin also disproportionately incarcerates African Americans. African American males specifically make up between 35 to 40% of the Department of Corrections in Wisconsin. We're also pushing for the expansion of programs like Earned Release Program, treatment alternatives and diversion, increased funding to those programs. Basically, what we're looking for is to channel individuals that are looking at challenges and facing challenges that exist within urban environments, within poverty, within communities of color, and otherwise, away from penal institutions and towards resources that are going to help them live productive lives and lives with a lot of value, both to themselves, their families, and the community. Full time, I own a company called We Adapt. We Adapt provides pure mentorship, or peer support, I should say, and mentorship. We contract with the Comprehensive Community Services Program. I specifically work primarily with youth of color in the western region of Wisconsin, several different counties. I also work with adults, many of whom have incarceration histories, addiction histories, or those type of challenges similar to what I've experienced in my life. Thank you for having me on today.
Sorry about that. I had to unmute myself. I couldn't get it fast enough. So, so Lester, if you can please do the same for me, if you can please share about who you are. Thank you.
My name is Lester Moore. I'm a police officer with the City of Madison Police Department, originally from Houston, Texas. I spent some time in the U.S. Marine Corps before coming here. And, some of my assignments that I've worked in, I've been a neighborhood officer twice, Allied Drive neighborhood officer, Dartwood Worthington neighborhood officer. Right now, working in I was actually the city's first gang officer, dealing with youth gangs in the city of Madison, and currently back in that assignment again as a gang officer. And this is, again, my 22nd year with the City of Madison Police Department.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Again, I thank every single last one of you all for being here. Every single last one of y'all are phenomenal and change agents in our community and outside of our community as well. I'm going to go ahead and kind of go back to you, Colleen. You've been working in analyzing data at the front end of the system. Can you describe, excuse me, can you describe that work, that briefly describe your findings?
Sure, thank you. Yes, so I coordinate the Criminal Justice Council for Dane County. It's that collaborative body, so cjc.countyofdane.com. The whole purpose is to start eliminating some of the silos, right? Mm-hmm. Between those stakeholders, between the stakeholders and community, and between what's going on here and what could happen here, leaning on national and community experts. Can we go to the next slide? So why is the front end from our standpoint so important? It's because it's the front door, right? So we're trying to deflect and divert as much as possible. Prior to 2015, there was no way to say if Lester arrested me in Madison or Sun Prairie, I was the same person then booked into jail, and that was Colleen at initial appearance and throughout the system. So it was, my analogy is it's a series of windowless huts typically. Law enforcement, a police department knows their data and knows what's going on there, but they don't know how it impacts bookings and jail, right? And jail doesn't know how court processes impact. And so the bottom line is we don't know how it impacts the individuals and or the system. So just as if you wanted to gain or lose weight, an important first start is, what do I weigh, right? And prior to 2015, we couldn't identify that. So next slide, please. And ask me questions, Coop, if you have. So we're moving towards, we're not there yet. We're moving towards better data understanding. And some of those CJC partners that share data include Madison Police, Fitchburg, Middleton, Monona, Verona, and Sun Prairie, the district attorney, the sheriff, and the courts. So we have the CJC endorsed, and the county board then supported a CJC research analyst. I keep trying to grow that team because the demands for data and more analysis are greater than ever, as they should be. I should hearken back to we first started combining, looking at data in 2008, 2009. I was staff on the 2009 Task Force on Racial Disparities in the Criminal Justice System. So the key is looking at data and be able to disaggregate it by race, gender, ethnicity, and age. So then we can target policies and changes to make a difference in our system. Some of the initial reports are the first look at law enforcement data. That was really those 6 jurisdictions. We've got, and these are on the website, so I'm not going to go through all of them because they're lengthy, but drivers of the jail population and familiar faces in Dane County. So I'll get to those a little bit later. Next slide, please. So for the law enforcement data, we were looking at these 6 agencies, right, that are part of the data sharing agreement, but it's not like they all have the same chief, right? They're their own departments. But what we tried to do is work with them and try to give the community a general feel for what accounts for about 65 to 70% of law enforcement interactions in Dane County are those 6 jurisdictions. There's over 300,000 calls for service. Then out of that, so you can see I'm kind of funneling down.
Right.
We look at this as a funnel. Out of that, 28,000 approximately individuals were involved with police enforcement contact. That could be a municipal citation or a custodial arrest, taken to jail, right? And then out of that 28,000, over 3,500 were involved in any booking during that 1 year, right? So that means it was a custodial arrest, which, yes, there are some mandatory arrests, but they were taken to jail. And 21% of that 3,500 were arrested and booked more than twice in a year. Now, when we look and we disaggregate that data by race, we see a little over 16% of Black residents had any enforcement action, i.e. the citation or the bookings. 76% were white. When we look at who is then booked into jail, the story changes dramatically, right? And it goes to 42% Black in any booking, 52% white. So the law enforcement interactions, the bigger, it's heavier white, less Black. Who's booked into jail? It gets much more, the scale kind of flips up, and Black individuals are booked at a disproportional rate to that enforcement context. So the question obviously is, well, like, what happened, right? And so we have done some of that research, looking at criminal history, looking at mandatory arrests. Oftentimes holds, right? External holds are one of the main drivers. Those probation holds, DOC holds require the booking. And so those are some of the key takeaways. But we see this as a real area that we need to focus on as a CJC. Next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you go to the next slide, and I'll ask you this, as I say, and I've said this a million times as a friend and a colleague in the work that what we do in for our community, like when you start to get this data, where did you, like, how did you feel? Like, like, what was your first, like, okay, like, oh, this is jacked up. Is there some, like, wait a minute, is this right? Did you do a recheck, or kind of, like, have we really been doing this all this time?
Yeah.
Because if we're looking at this is 2016. So how far does this actually go back, right?
Yeah, that's a great question, Coop, and I appreciate that. The task force, the original task force that I staffed, the 2009 task force, used less accurate data, right? It used CCAP data. It wasn't, as we call, deduplicated. It wasn't at the person level. So lots of folks had a lot of questions about that disproportionality, like how accurate is it? And, you know, kind of zoomed in on looking at the accuracy of the data. When folks, and then it kind of plays out, you know, what, 12 years later, or in this data that is accurate data, right? That we know, and we've talked to all the chiefs that were involved. This took us about a year and a half to do, because law enforcement, every department's different. So coming up with common understanding was challenging. Disaggregating that down and figuring out, okay, why did it flip like that? And seeing, frankly, how much criminal history and DOC had to do with that. A little bit mandatory arrests, but not as much as you would think. I mean, my big thing is what I say oftentimes when people either quibble about data is, look, if my kid is getting a D or a D minus, that's a failure. I need to make some system improvements, right? We need to make some changes. I'm not going to sit in the data and say, was that a 62 or a 58? And so, yeah, this is huge. And this is a huge reason you see some of the workload that we've got, and hopefully some of the things that'll be coming up in our future for Dane County changing. But, you know, part of what we're seeing is this complete switch. And actually it happened in a different analysis around disorderly conducts. Very similar, right? The white residents, higher disorderly conducts with the enforcement contact, right? Much higher. Black residents here. But then who's booked into jail? It really, then the tables switched almost. And then when you think about Dane County and the state of Wisconsin demographics being, you know, 85% white, 6 to 8% black, that disproportionality is huge, right? It's not like the population base, 52% white is, you know, 52 out of 100 white people and 40. It's disproportional because there are so many more white people as well, and so fewer black people in this county and in the state of Wisconsin.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You know, I always appreciate your input, and I love the fact that you have always been someone who will just put things out there like they are. So I just wanted to let you know I really appreciate that. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and continue on.
Sure. Next slide. Okay, so through some of that work, we were looking at, okay, who in that, the highest group that's having any law enforcement contact, right? Disproportionately younger adult, disproportionately male adult. What jurisdictions then are diverting to something else, right? Especially for, you know, younger adults, the elected champions were like, there's got to be a better way than booking into jail. One of the old jail captains said, you never want to demystify the jail, right? You want to keep it so people don't come in that booking Sally Port. We've noticed that a little less than 1,000 individuals had 3 or more contacts with police in 2016. And I think that plays out probably every year. And Lester, certainly folks on the front lines can bear out. You have multiple contacts with the same person. And so the question becomes, well, why? And is there a way to address kind of the root cause of that interaction with police in a different way? And so we're working on that as well. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was that the Dane County jail admission rate over the last what is that, like 18 years, has really substantially declined. And this is pre-COVID, right? This data is pre-COVID. We're jailing less people, period, which is a really good thing. The disproportionality of who we're jailing, I don't think has changed, right? So
Right.
we're jailing overall, jailing a lot less folks, which is great. Because the research is showing even 2 days in jail can have a huge negative impact, not on just the individual, but their family, their community, and potentially public safety, because the more folks you're with, the more it's like, you know, 2-3 days is no time at all to do, right? So that's another key. So what the CJC, one of the things we're working on now is the jail population has gone down even lower than it ever had, and we were at historic lows. We know, likely because court isn't even open officially yet, that you may see some upshifts, but what policy and procedural changes can we make that will be sustainable, that you saw during COVID, right? To keep more people out of that jail. Next slide. So how do we move forward with change? From my perspective, I always use a three-legged stool analogy. We need the community. We need the community to share the story behind the data, to humanize that data. We need the community to look and think about what are those root causes and solutions. And the community, and from my perspective, are, you know, the closest to the problem or the closest to the solution. So we really need to partner in a different way. We also need research. We need that accurate data, because that's the way we prove, you know, that's the way you can argue a fiscal, make a fiscal. So if the humanity argument doesn't work, you know, it's really important from a policy perspective, I think, also to be able to make a fiscal argument. Does this make any sense to spend this money in this way? And then partnering with local and national researchers and those stakeholders that are really key. The Dane County Criminal Justice Council has 3 subcommittees: racial disparities, pretrial reform, and behavioral health. Front and midlife staff, I'm not going to say, you know, that's really important. That's the folks on the line, those elected champions, and always have racial equity embedded in that change, looking at that data, getting the story behind that data. Next slide. And so the last thing I wanted to leave you with, you know, in a challenging, obviously challenging time, has any of this worked for Dane County, right? Using data and community and elected champions. I point to the Dane County Community Restorative Court, 17 to 26-year-olds. Community members are key in those peacemaking circles. Data was the first step, you know, in saying, okay, for 17 to 26-year-olds, it looks really disproportional for the misdemeanor. What community could we potentially pilot in, right? And it piloted in South Madison. And one of the reasons it piloted there is we had those strong community partners, right? So it piloted there and now has expanded. Some hopeful things, I think, on the horizon right now, a Dane County Community Justice Center, really centering on racial equity and procedural fairness, is in the planning stages. So we've had some pre-engagements with community groups, and we will have a national expert kind of help us guide that process, with a hope for something to look very different. And then the last thing I'll mention is, again, a potential, we're in the planning stage. I think the RFP just closed to get some help on determining if we need a triage and restoration center, i.e., you know, if somebody has a behavioral health crisis, should the choices for law enforcement, which that's most often who's there, take them to jail or take them to the emergency room. and this would be a different option, right? So those are some of the things that I think I'm hopeful about, as well as the city of Madison is piloting a crisis response mobile unit, kind of like the Cahoots model that the
Right.
CJC and the county 911 is helping support that model as well. So with that, that's a lot of information. There's a ton on our website. You can go to the last slide. You can ask me questions or we can hold. But there is a ton of reports on our website. It might be hard to feel like reading through all of that stuff, but I will say the cool things, or the things that I think have a huge potential impact on our county and therefore on each of our residents, are both the Justice Center and the triage.
First,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yep, that's it. No, I'm good.
No, I know. I just wanted to say thank you. I know, because thank you just for all you do, all your research, and your team as well. I've seen you guys put some things together that I was like, oh wow, didn't know that, or didn't. So I really respect your work. So I guess I'm gonna go ahead and jump over to and then I'm gonna have some Q&A time as well. I'm trying to make sure I built that in, because the hour goes quick. So for Lester, I wanna Lester, yeah, oh, there you go.
I'm having problems, but I'm good.
Oh no. Yeah. Hopefully everything's okay over there. So Lester, just wanted to just go ahead and get to it as far as, so what happens is just hearing everything what Colleen had mentioned, and you play a different role in it, right? So what happens when someone is arrested? Do the police determine the charges, and and how do you navigate that? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's several different things that can bring us in contact with a person, which could lead to arrest. Sometimes we get a call. There's also proactive policing, where we're out and about and we're just, we're looking for, violations of law that might be happening. And that's usually for traffic stops, which we haven't really been doing a lot of that now because with COVID and vehicle registrations, and a lot of times that affects people, low-income folks, because of vehicle registrations and stuff like that. And then you stop people, and then there's other things, or people that might have, probation or parole warrants that put you in contact with those people. So when you get into a situation where you have developed probable cause to arrest, there are many things that we have what's called discretion on, where we can decide whether we're going to arrest, whether we're going to give a citation, whether we're going to give a verbal warning. And so that's it. And that's a good and bad thing to me at times. I think if it's applied correctly, it's a good thing. And that you can make decisions based on the totality of everything. Because sometimes arrest is not necessarily the best option. When you're talking about when you're dealing with people in the community and making the decision about whether you're going to not incarcerate, but if you're going to make an arrest or take someone, book someone in the jail, or if you're going to give a citation. So once that decision is made, there are some things where we don't have discretion, like domestics. If we develop probable cause in a domestic, we have to arrest. And I would almost say, even with OWIs, drunk driving, that's something that we have to. And then sometimes first time, if they have someone to come pick them up, they aren't necessarily arrested. They're turned over to that person. If not, then, they have to go on a hold. But, but an arrest is made, but not necessarily a physical arrest, but, a citation arrest or something like that is made. But then once you make the decision to take someone to jail, when you have probable cause, we recommend what we believe the charge is. So I say that I arrest someone and we use disorderly conduct is used a lot. So say someone is arrested for disorderly conduct and the decision is made to take to jail. So we take them to jail for the disorderly conduct. We have to articulate why we believe the conduct was disorderly, why it created the disturbance, who was disturbed. You would go down to the jail, and then you write what's called a probable cause statement. So you have to include all the elements of what disorderly conduct is. And you write that probable cause statement, you fill out a booking sheet, and then you turn those folks over to the folks at the Dane County Jail. And when we do our police report, and then we have a section under the police department called the criminal intake unit. And what they do is they arrange our paperwork, they'll put together the complaint, and then the DA's office decides ultimately what the charges will be going forward into court. So there have been times where I've decided to charge someone with disorderly conduct and maybe another charge of maybe a disorderly conduct ×2 or whatever. And the DA's office can say, okay, we're not going to charge that, but we're going to charge this. There have been times where the DA's office didn't agree or believe that maybe the case that I brought forward did not lack merit. So they will say, we're not going to charge this at all. We're going to dismiss this charge. Person's released from jail, and they no longer have to have anything to do with the court system. So there's many outcomes from an arrest, but each arrest is a serious thing because you're dealing with someone's life, and then at some point, people can possibly lose their jobs. There's all sorts of things. It's like, when you make that arrest, this big ball starts to roll that has this huge effect on many parts of not just that person's life, but people who are connected to them as well. You have, if you arrest the breadwinner, and so you have to think about those things when you deprive someone of their freedom. At that point, you have to ask yourself, okay, what's the effect? It's like writing a ticket to a person who, like a young mom that's trying to go to work, that's trying to feed her kids. You stop her, she doesn't have her license right now, but if you add more money onto I'm gonna write you another ticket for, however much money, she's not gonna be able to get her license at some point. I think a lot of us, not, a lot of us officers, there would be nice to have a place where you could refer people to and say, hey, I know you don't have your license, but, you can't continue to drive. But here is a place that you can go to where you can get your license, like, pretty quick. Because people need that stuff quick. And a lot of times our processes take too long. And you're not able to help people. Most officers that get into this job, they say we get into this job to help people. And then you find that a lot of times the processes in place do not allow you to help people the way you want to help people, and then it winds up hurting more than helping. But, that's the whole process. You didn't ask me all that. No. That's the process as I've experienced it.
But Lester, but what you said, I think is very important, right? But I think one of the other pieces that was probably not talked about, and I believe we talked about this on a segment that we had working with HR, is the fact that where a lot of HR do not quite understand what does a disorderly conduct, what does that mean? Right, because it's such a wide range of what that means, and so it may affect that person on their job, affect them. Even I even seen at times it affected people with their housing, right? And so because whoever, whether HR representative, housing representative, who doesn't have a vast knowledge of that. Either way it goes, that individual is actually losing, right? Because it's kind of like, all right, so I go apply for an apartment. Well, what is this early conduct about? Well, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example. I told the officer, just leave me alone, right? or whatever, very verbal or whatever. But for some, and I've seen it play out, as you know, I used to be a national recruiter as well. I've seen it play out that where, hey, people will look at that like, wait a minute. So this person, they did something to disturb whatever. They're going to become a nuisance at the job. They're going to do this, that, or the other, right? And so those also become the other problems, barriers for individuals. And it's not even a felony, right? Yep. So there's so much education that I feel like it's like one part of me is thinking, oh, there's education that needs to happen around the data. There's education that needs to also happen around charges that needs to be put out there to the community at large. And especially, people who are quote unquote in charge, bosses, HR, so on and so forth, housing divisions and so on, so on, because there's so much that individuals don't know. And it's kind of like, hey, it's this mark that's on my record. This is saying disorderly conduct. all right, you're a nuisance. That's all I know, right? You know, I mean, that becomes a bigger issue for so many people.
And, and,
Especially
and,
like,
and certainly there's a difference between having one disorderly conduct. Anybody, that could happen to just about anybody.
yeah,
You know, now if you got 30 of them, you know, that
Right.
might say that maybe there's something going on, you know, that, you know, maybe, you know, there's some mental health issues, or maybe you got some anger issues you need to deal with. But one disorderly conduct, you could have been having a bad day, you know, a bad day. Police got involved and we had to do something. You know what I'm saying? We had to, you know, either write your ticket, or if it was something that would rose to the level of, yeah, we need to make a physical arrest on this because you did some stuff that really like had a lot of people scared out here, you know? And when I say people scared, I do take into account, you know, what some people fear being done by certain people that look a certain way. You know
now
what I'm
call
saying?
it what it is, please.
You know,
You don't
some of us look
sugarcoat it.
scarier. Some of us look more frightening than others do to people who don't have experience with people that look like us. You know what I'm saying? So
if they're black
try
and
to
burly
take that-
like myself, that's a problem. That could become a
or
potential
like
problem,
myself,
and I
or
can
like myself, because
see it.
you know, people don't realize I don't wear my uniform 24 hours a day. I don't sleep in it. You know, I don't,
right.
you know, and these things can happen. Like, you know, you can, you know, walk into a store or something. So you could have a bad interaction with a clerk at Walmart. Someone could say something really slick to you, and you could just stand up for yourself and say, "Hey, I don't appreciate that." And with me, I put some bass in my voice, and all of a sudden, people are afraid. Like, you're a scary dude. And then, you know, officers could come and say, "Well, the person felt afraid because blah blah blah," and then that could be a citation. And then if I start to argue it, you know, and I become animated or whatever, and depending on, you know, it could lead to a physical arrest. I'm not saying these things don't happen, because they do. It could lead to a physical arrest. And all you was trying to do is go, you know, get some t-shirts at Walmart. And the next thing you know, you're winding up in jail. These things happen, you know, and so, and a lot of things that need to happen around that, like you said, education of the community about exactly what does disorderly conduct mean. And then for that particular individual, what was their case? If that's someone you're interested in hiring, find out the whole story. You know, if it's one of DC, find out the whole story. There's a police report, ask questions, you know, because there's quality people out there. For officers, you know, we have to learn about working with different people of different communities that don't look like us. So we have to learn how people communicate, how they move. You know, for example, and I'll just run this to you real quick. I remember being out on the street. I remember two sisters talking, two women of color talking, and they're having this great conversation. And like like all the strong women in my family who run my family are having this great conversation, going back and forth. Girl, I'm gonna do this. Girl, and so the officer was like, "Is there a problem here?" And I was like, "Nah, man, they just talking. You know, don't worry about it. It's good. You know." But can you imagine if I wasn't there and they went up and said, "Hey, is there a problem?" And then they're like, "Well, we don't have a problem. Do you have a problem?" And then it turns into a problem. These things actually happen. You know what I'm saying? So when you serve a community, it's your job to know that community and how they communicate, how they move. It's all a part of service, and law enforcement is service. So we have to change the way we view the people that we serve. We have to know them. We have to educate ourselves. We have to get in there. You can't do that if you're not out talking to people and learning what's important to those people, you know? And then when you do have to hold people accountable, it makes it easier because you have relationship. And so your decision-making becomes different, you know, and you try to come up with more creative ways to deal with issues. Certainly, many times things end up in arrest. They do, you know, but there's so many other things. And for me, you know, I feel like until we get serious about where we're going to spend this money, are we going to spend it on the front end, or are we going to spend it on the back end? Because on the front end, a lot of our kids that we're dealing with, you know, especially in the gang unit, there's a lot of young people that we're dealing with. We're talking about early childhood traumas that cause these behaviors later on in life. Can't we spend a little money dealing with the early childhood traumas? When I found out about that, ACE factors, I was like, that's the key. People used to always ask me, what's the key to dealing with, you know, gang violence? I said, that's it.
Right.
We found out a lot of our young women who were involved in disorderly conduct, again, fighting in the community and things like that. We went back and started looking at prior police contacts that they had had, and many of them had been victims of some type of abuse as young people. So as a community, we got to come together around a lot of these young folks and early, because a lot of officers can tell you which kids are going to have issues, because we go into houses, we meet people at points of crisis, you know, and we can tell you, okay, this family needs this family needs that, you know. And are we utilizing our officers? Are we utilizing our other agencies to the fullest potential to ultimately divert people in that way from the criminal justice system before they even have contact with police, you know? So,
but there's something even add on to that though, but many families will actually tell you what they need.
Yes.
But you have to be willing to listen, right?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm not saying you as an officer, but just us as a community. So if
Yes.
we're willing to listen, but then also not just listen, put action behind it, not 5
Yeah.
years down the road. You know what I mean? Let's go ahead and move on it, right?
Yes.
That's what's going to end up changing, because just like if you, it was something that what you had just said, just like even with childhood traumas and things of that nature. So if we can address the childhood trauma, that we know what are some of the likely outcomes of that,
Yes.
you know, there's so much more that we can do by wrapping our arms around this person, not in a way of saying, hey, look, we're here to support you, even when you may think that where no one is, and showing them what that support looked like, because some folks do not know.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to explain to them too, right? So it's education on both sides, because some people, I'm just saying, right? You say, hey, I went to school, I understand this, I understand that, and I understand the philosophy of Joe Bob. I'll say Joe Bob, right? You know, and Joe Bob's family. Everyone is different. I think you know, education is beautiful. So hopefully it doesn't come across as though I'm hating against something against education, but I think that there's a process. It's the human component that we have to make sure is in there, right? You know, so that's why it's a skill to be able to utilize individuals who have the lived experience, to be able to put them in the mix so they can sit down and say, hey, look, you know what? I may don't know your exact situation, but I can tell you a little bit about mine. And so for us to be able to talk about that, you know, if you're willing to, but being able to, is nothing's forced, being able to give people a choice to be able to do that is well. And it may not come when you want it to come. But I think the fact that when people know that they can have something like that over time, is you start kind of chipping at that brick, right? You know, and kind of molding someone a little bit different.
You know, and real quick to add on, you know, like you said, you have to ask the people who are being affected, you know, what they need, you know. And I can remember during the time when Noble Ray was chief, someone came up with, we had this meeting, and someone asked the question, why doesn't the Black community like police officers? You know, and we had this meeting, and I think the intention behind it was good, but the way it was put together, because the people they asked the question to, they brought in, and I certainly nothing against educated people, but they brought in 3 UW professors, 3 white UW professors. Nothing against them. I mean, some good stuff was said, but there was no one from the Black community brought in to say, hey, this is the issue we got, and this is what we need, and this is what we're getting from you, but this is what we need from you. And then for us to be able to say, hey, I understand what you need. These are the parameters that we have to work within. How can we come to, you know, some type of middle ground so we can say, okay, okay, that's what y'all need. Oh, that's why y'all do what you do as police officers. Okay, we understand, but we didn't quite. This was the infancy of talking more about diversity, talking more about how can we, you know, develop these relationships in the Black community. And I say the Black community because, you know, again, I come from that community, and I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of this stuff. And it's like one of the most hurt communities when you talk about the law enforcement's effect on a community. The Black community is like, you know, I'm from the days of Rodney King. You know what I'm saying? And you know, I look back on that, and when we saw that video, we were like, we're not surprised. We knew this was going on. You know, this is before I became a police officer, you know, and I was like, you know, when I think about, we have to ask those people that are affected by what we do. We have to ask them, what do you need? And then what can we do? And how can, this is what we do. How can we do this better? And let's explain to you what we're doing so that you can understand why we do what we do, and then help us make maybe some changes in how we, and you know, how we do what we do. Because when I talk to young brothers on the street, I always take a chance to, you know, because I feel like I got a lot of time to just talk to young people, and they always say, Officer Lester, it's not what the officer did, it's how he did what he did. It's how he came at me. Those are the main things that young brothers and sisters always tell me on the street. I don't like the way that officer came at me. So we have to start thinking about how we're presenting ourselves to the community, because we are servants to the community. That's the bottom line.
Thank you so much, Lester, man. I really appreciate everything that you just said. That just, yeah. And again, I always just say that, you know, this is when we do our lunch and learns, this is community talk. This is us being able to come together. David, you know, thank you again for being here as well. I just want to be able to, there's a couple, actually, I got so much stuff to kind of bring David in about some other stuff I want to talk to him about as well. So what has been your experience been with the process from arrest to court? Either personal or observation, or from your advocacy work that you're doing up north?
Well, I mean, there's so much I can piggyback off of what Colleen said. We're dealing with a lot of stuff with data up here in Eau Claire. We have a data analyst in Eau Claire County, and just a lot of games being played with the portrayal of what that data means in areas where it isn't collected. And then also what Lester said, you know, that first touch point with the justice system, which is law enforcement. The work that I do with my company, We Adapt, that's what we practice, is trauma-informed care. And I'm going to be the first to tell you, both from experience and from working in this field now, is if you show up with a gun, there isn't a way to have trauma-informed care. As soon as a person shows up with a pistol, in my presence, especially in a moment of crisis, that pistol, especially on the hip of a law enforcement officer, it could be used to kill me. It may not be used to kill me. It depends on what their state of mind is. It depends on how they see me. So this is something up in this community. The agency that I started was specifically for that. If there's a person in crisis, now there's a lot of other areas that law enforcement comes in contact with individuals, some of those being necessary, some of those being because there's a lack of resources and it gets defaulted to law enforcement to handle. The agency I created is to fill that gap so that law enforcement doesn't need to be going to these crisis situations, particularly the crisis situations where if you have a gun on your hip, you're a threat to me. Because if you're already a person in crisis, if you grew up the way that some of us who came up in certain environments and in poverty came up, a gun automatically raises the stakes of that situation. It provokes a trauma response in me. It provokes a trauma response in the individuals I work with. And so we are missing a resource throughout all of our communities in Wisconsin to react to these crisis situations, partly because the social services profession isn't necessarily filled with people that want to respond to those situations. I'm a military veteran. I'm on 2 tours in Iraq. I also know a lot about trauma-informed care now. So this is a unique combination because I'm willing to go to a situation that a person may be explained as being hostile, may be explained as being possibly violent. I'm not worried about that. I've seen worse than that. But I'm able to approach that from a trauma-informed perspective, which means I do not match anger with anger. I do not match aggression with aggression. I come from a place of assertiveness, but at the same time, I understand that this person is reacting in this moment, probably based on those very ACEs that Lester was talking about. And it has only been perpetuated, especially if they've been recycling back through the system. It is only perpetuated. That trauma is built upon and exacerbated each time they go into the system. And then they're confronted first at the touch point of law enforcement arresting them, and then corrections officers in jail, the other individuals in jail who are also responding based on trauma, and then in the courtroom where they're seen as less than a human being, and then in prison or jail where they're being strip searched where they're being drugged down, where they're being starved in some cases, where you're being put in the hole. I mean, the entire cycle is one big trauma on top of multiple other traumas that have occurred in the person's life. It is a inhumane system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Man, David, I would say, David, are you half pastor or preacher? At the same time, that I kind of just got that, that vibe from you right there. So, because you hit everything right on the head, and I think, man, in all of this, I think we have to not only address trauma, we also have to be able to address the perception of how things are being looked at. We have to be able to address the inner workings and making sure people are not working in silos through our state, but also with our nonprofits, profits, and other agencies that are also connected. These are all things that we have to make sure that we're working on. And it just hearing what everyone has said and looking at the data, hearing what Lester said, being on the ground, and also from David, even from myself, I think, there's so much work that has to be done. And I feel like sometimes there's a fear of just really just putting it out there and say, look, we got work to do, right? So it's either you're going to get in and pull up your boots and get things going, right? Jump in the car so we can get things going together, or move to the other side, right? Yeah, and stand by and kind of watch in this process until you feel like it's ready. Until you feel like you're ready to be a part of what that process may be. But and one of the things I think I love more than anything about, especially with our lunch and learns, and even for some of our, I should say some, but in our meetings that we have offline, is that when you're among trusted people and people who are, and this is even from what I know about each of you, David, you and I are just kind of just meeting, right? But I love the fact that everyone here is being fully transparent. And this is something that I feel in our state, in our country, right, is not happening. And so we're always kind of just in one way or another, we end up having some door that's kind of shut in our face for a minute until the new idea that comes up, and then we open up this new type of door and say, oh, but someone else has said that 50 years ago, 100 years ago for some, and but yet, and during that time, people did not feel like they were ready. So, I know we have a few questions in here. I want to make sure and the time is ticking down. But let me see. This is from Julia. Julia Colleen, this is a question for you. She asked, she said, do you think, I'm kind of squinting because I cannot find my glasses. I got to tell them myself. I'm just like,
I think I've got it. Coop. Her question is around how, can we sustain lower jail populations, especially with, not arresting, custodial arrests for nonviolent offenses, things like child support warrants, etc. The child support thing in Dane County is less, I'll be honest. It wasn't a big number. It's a really small number. So that's kind of been taken care of. But as part of the work on the CJC, that was a question we asked, like, what can you sustain, Madison Police, right? What can you sustain, DA? And so they've all got their own answers. I think definitely there are some things that can be sustained pretty easily. And to Lester's point, the less involvement this could move from A to B to Z, which is getting to jail, the better. So I think some of those things have been discussed, and we're working with Professor John Eason at UW to kind of look and do a full analysis of that. The hope is, we can say, look at how this impacted. Couldn't we keep that up? And if, I always say criminal justice reform is like trying to turn a big ship people think you should be able to turn like on a dime, and the system just wants to keep moving forward. So this conversation is awesome because it makes me feel like there's a lot of people that want a lot of movement. So yes, we'll keep researching it, and yes, the community should push for people to look for alternatives to getting folks in jail.
Thank you so much. So I'm gonna ask the magic wand question, right? So and whoever decides, you can popcorn it. But so if you had a magic wand, what changes would you make to the process from arrest to court? So whoever wants to take it, don't fight about it. Just go for it.
I'll jump in on that. In the Smart Justice campaign for the ACLU of Wisconsin, and in the work that I do with peer support and mentorship, we center people with lived experience. So when I was talking about being a crisis responder, being that intermediary between the system and the individual, those are the people that need to be there. In a lot of cases, there's barriers that stop a person from getting into the position that they can be that intermediary. That could be education, that can be certificates, that could be trainings. And so my magic wand is basically what I'm doing with my company is I'm bringing people along regardless whether they have some of those credentials, because we can get them those credentials. We can get them what they have, the most important part, which is the experience and the instincts. So now we just need to get them the paperwork that says that they're qualified for Medicaid, that they're qualified for comprehensive community services. And now we have the right people in the right positions. So that would be my magic wand, is alleviating those barriers.
Thank you so much. I like that. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. I think for the law enforcement perspective, I think if we change the way we answer calls for service, that put us in the positions to have contact with people. I think there's a lot of stuff we go to that we shouldn't go to. And, as far as, and this is just me speaking personally, I'm not speaking for any department or anything like that. But when you talk about the mental health calls where we have to do emergency detentions, are we the most qualified people to make the decision on who needs to be emergency detained? I know that we have to make the decision about, if the person is a danger to themselves or others, but could a mental health professional make that determination? I know it's easy to put officers in those positions because we're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's easy to just call and send a cop there. But there are some things that, we're not trained for. And I said we get training, but wouldn't it be better to have a mental health professional there to deal with that? Now, if it got to a point where it was totally got out of control, things got violent, and they could call us and we could respond, but we shouldn't be the first people responding. That's one of the things. And again, when I talk about the way we answer calls for service, there are people calling us and saying, hey, my kid won't get up for school. I need a police officer to come here. And you're putting kids in contact with police officers because they don't want to get up and go to school. That's a parenting issue. That's not a law enforcement issue. Yeah. So we shouldn't be going to that, having contact with these young brothers and sisters, anybody else, because they don't want to get up for school. Should be another place that they can call and say, my kid won't get up for school. What other resources? How about calling the school? Or how about calling some other agency that deals with young people to get them motivated to go to school? But there's a whole nother issue as to why they don't want to go to school, because maybe the environment in school is a place that's not welcoming to them. But police officers shouldn't be going to that. So there's some violent crime that happens in the community. We need to be able to deal with that. There's other stuff that officers can go to that they are more suited for than those particular calls for service. And so that will, and I tell young brothers all the time, keep yourself out of the crosshairs of the criminal justice system by not having contact with police, by not having contact with police, whatever by any means necessary, because when you have contact, then you don't have control over that situation anymore. So do things that do not put you in contact with the police. Think about where you are, what you're doing, and all this other stuff until the system changes, which, like you said, it's hard to you can't stop it on a dime and turn it. So how are we helping them to stay safe? How are we helping them to keep from having those contacts? So again, changing the way we answer calls for service might be one of those things.
Thank you so much. Colleen, would you go ahead and jump in there? I know we're cracking right at 1 o'clock. So
Sure. I would just say to both of their points, yes, centering on community and folks with lived experience, but really rethink who and why we're booking people into jail. Are we scared? Are we mad at them? And then what are the strong alternatives and how can we all get behind them? You know, from cops to like the entire community, how can we get behind those strong alternatives that really aim to change root cause?
all right. Well, I want to say thank you so much for being here with us today, and thank you for our participants, our attendees, and our panel. Look forward to the next. I'm just kind of lost for words right now because I love this so much, right? So just please be on the lookout for the next one. Looking forward to having more great conversations. Again, until next time, looking forward to catching up with every single last one of you sometime soon. You take care.
So we just hang up now?
Yeah. You can just hang up. Unless you want to, let me put the music down.
That's
So that's it.
Hey,
So that's
that's
it.
some stuff we can talk about now.
Yeah.
Don't let me bust out some DMX because I'm in mourning right
Oh,
now.
don't start nothing now.
Bruh.
Yeah, man. So much stuff going on. Yeah, man. But I want to thank every single last one of you all. People can still hear us, so just kind of let you know we're not completely gone from everyone, but you all are definitely phenomenal. Looking forward to catching up with you all soon. If something, as always, if you need me for something, don't hesitate to call. So, all right. Peace and blessings, y'all. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.